Hello, time for another vlog, or basically I'm talking about changing the basis of the economy for the purposes of climate change mitigation. But actually there's a lot of things to talk about this week, and I'm not going to talk about them much. First, summer is over in Britain, hence I've got a jumper on. Or a cardigan technically. Brexit. In a way, I've stopped caring about Brexit. I can't be bothered. It just goes on and on. But we have had this week the rare spectacle, in fact the unique spectacle, I think, of the government trying to put itself out of office and the opposition parties voting to keep them in power. Only Brexit could do this, right? Very strange. But the reason being that if the government is out of power, Brexit will go through because there'll be nobody in Parliament to stop it. I think that's the basic idea. But anyway, climate change. And everybody's saying we have to do a lot of stuff to stop it. We have to not do a lot of stuff to stop it as well. But it seems to me nothing's going to change unless we change the basis of our economy, or our economies, because there's multiple countries, of course. Because at the moment, companies and corporations are continuing to trash the planet for the sake of profit, short-term profit, and that's it. I can recycle a bit of paper or something and it really doesn't make any difference. I can boycott certain goods. Pardon me. But since most people aren't doing the right stuff, for sort of the unwashed masses who won't do anything, who don't understand it, who don't care until there's no food on their tables, I'm not going to do anything. So how do we sort it out? It seems to me it comes down to the economy. Our whole economic system is based around money, unsurprisingly. If you lived about 6,000 or 10,000 years ago, you would be surprised to know the economy was based around money, because they didn't have it. But right now we do. But money is itself a proxy for other things. It represents happiness, because you can use it to make yourself happier, which in our society in the West we tend to interpret as buying more stuff. It's a mistake. It's even a mistake psychologically, but we do it. It's a mistake psychologically because you get a brief burst of happiness followed by your continuing angst and misery that you were in your normal state afterwards. And the idea is you just keep buying stuff because the companies know it doesn't really make you happy. So you'll buy more stuff, and they'll keep advertising to you to persuade you that the next packet of cornflakes is going to make you happy because everybody on the box is smiling, and all that. It represents also freedom. Money represents freedom because you can't really do anything almost without money. You can't even eat unless you scramble about in the woods somewhere for a toxic mushroom or something. It represents power to some people, and over and above all of these things, it has a practical use because it's a measure of the demand for a product. The price signal is crucial to allowing the market to regulate how much of which products are produced. And the price signal is generated by human behaviour, people buying stuff that they want. If they're prepared to pay more for it, it's worth more of the company's while to make it. Or alternatively, if the company can make it in vast quantities, they can sell it cheaply and still make a big profit. But either way, you're using the price signal as a gauge of production. When things are cheap, there may be less incentive to produce them unless you can produce them in volume. When they're expensive, well, there you go. It attracts companies to the market and so on. And we don't know of a way of regulating production without using a price signal as yet. Maybe some artificial intelligence systems could do it or something. It's probably something which might just become feasible over the course of the next few years or centuries, probably years. But at the moment we need the price mechanism. But we have a problem when we're thinking about the environment, because we have all these companies trashing it basically for the sake of short-term profit. And in a way it's our fault because we're buying the stuff. But it's also not our fault because we're subject to propaganda and we're not educated for the most part on avoiding buying all this stuff that we don't actually need. We need some things, but of course a lot of the things we don't need or we can do with less of. Or we could buy more sustainable versions of, and so on. But we need to ask ourselves, why is it that these corporations, especially the big companies, seem so evil to us? What's going on there? Because they're trashing the environment. And yes, it comes back to us for buying stuff. They're only meeting our demand using the current system. But still, you get companies like, Monsanto is a favourite bugbear of almost everybody for producing toxic chemicals and so on. Things like Roundup, weed killer. And you get food companies producing absolute junk full of sugar, even savoury foods which you would think wouldn't require sugar, have loads of sugar in them, and can't they just stop it? Well, of course they can't. For two reasons, okay? One, the law. They are legally obliged to try to maximise shareholder value. And that value is measured in terms of money, profit, basically. Dividends, technically, but that comes out of profit. That's the law throughout all the world where they use the capitalist system, which is essentially all the world. Right? Second thing is what you might call first mover disadvantage. If a company wants to be more eco-friendly and sustainable, they risk increasing their costs. Not necessarily, sometimes it can work, but at first they risk increasing their costs and they risk reducing their profits. They risk people not purchasing their goods. For example, if a food company wants to reduce the sugar in their products or remove it from many of them and maybe not replace it with toxic substitutes like aspartame and so on, well, they can try it, but they risk the ordinary ignorant person not buying it because it doesn't taste the same. Even though you can't really taste the sugar in the savoury products, it still tweaks the old neurons that are set there to detect it, right? And it still tells your body, this is good stuff. And people unconsciously buy these things. And a company which stopped putting the sugar in the foods, for example, or the monosodium glutamates and other things, would find probably that their sales would drop and their competitors would outcompete them in the market, and they would go out of business if they persisted. So there are two things stopping companies from being what we might call good and responsible and socially beneficial to the rest of the world. The law, which makes it illegal, and competition, which makes it infeasible. So we actually need to change the law first, so that shareholder value perhaps is not measured in terms of money, though I don't know how else you'd measure it. But value is not necessarily money in English usage. As the saying goes, there are people who know the price of everything and the value of nothing. They're different concepts. However, in the economy we measure it as money at the moment. So if a company is going to want to improve its products or the way it makes them and so on, it needs a level playing field. So the government might change the law, for example, to give corporates a legal obligation to protect the environment, say, as well as to maximise shareholder value. Okay, that's fine, provided competitors are doing the same. That's why you need a law change, so that it's the same for everybody. Then you don't get the first mover disadvantage, because everybody's got to do it. You may have problems with international competition, though, so it needs to be probably by some sort of global, or at least major producers agreement. Another way to change the law might be to add the cost of externals to prices somehow. There would need to be some sort of international agreement on how to price externals, what the cost of damage to the environment is, basically, what the cost of cleaning up excess carbon dioxide emissions is, what the cost of depleting fossil fuels is, and other minerals. Somehow this would have to be all agreed, because the natural price mechanism gives it only cost price, basically, or even zero cost in effect, as far as most of the companies are concerned. Effectively, it's not enough to stop them doing it anyway. But at the moment, a company can deplete the world's resources, and that just pushes the cost onto future generations, and the company can continue to make a profit right now, which is all they can do. They have to maximise their profits. So that's why I think we need some sort of changes to the law and the economic system, and making an obligation to look after the environment may be one way, and pricing externals is probably another. You may get countries that will refuse to join in, like, Donald Trump land, perhaps. Well, you just have to boycott their products, basically, as an individual. But of course, again, most people won't do that. But you can apply moral pressure, and over time, governments change anyway. Now, changing the law is all very well, and the public can campaign for it, but we're in a system in the West in particular, but probably elsewhere too, where governments are in a state of corporate capture. I mean, laughably so in the USA. It's ridiculous. Donald Trump hardly makes a move without making things easier for the corporates and stuff the ordinary person, right? I remember I heard the other day some government official saying it was irresponsible of California to require Monsanto to label Roundup weed killer with a notice saying that it's known to cause cancer. Apparently that's irresponsible. Okay. To label it. So because the government is captured by the corporates and the corporates are obliged to maximise shareholder value, you have a vicious circle here, because the corporates are not going to lobby the government to change that, because that would affect their shareholder value or risk it. There's just no incentive there in terms of price and money. In fact, there's disincentives, really. So you get the ridiculous spectacle of companies like BP, British Petroleum, blathering on in their adverts about how green they are, and they're introducing green this and green that, and spending in fact only about 1% of their money on such projects, and spending many times more of that prospecting for more fossil fuels, because they know it's just not actually in their interests. A bit of PR is in their interests, but that's all. And they'll make gestures to their employees and allow them to go on strike for climate, possibly, or encourage some tree planting on the roof of the building or something, because they know it's not really going to change anything unless the companies themselves lobby the governments to make the changes. They know it's probably not going to happen. People can present petition after petition to the government. They can go on marches forever. And governments have learned the art of ignoring the public's wishes over recent decades. You have marches of upwards of 1 million people sometimes just ignored. We have these regular weekly strikes and marches in Paris now for the yellow jacket people, and we don't even hear it on the news because the media want to keep things calm. The powers that be don't want to change anything, really. So we can't really expect the corporates to lobby government for change. It does mean the people have to make a lot more noise, and probably civil disobedience is going to be necessary if the democratic mechanisms are not working, which arguably they are not, given corporate capture of the government. There is, though, another issue or question about changing the law, because if you're an Austrian economist or one of the Chicago School or Milton Friedman-Knight free marketeer, you're going to worry that introducing obligations to look after the environment, or taxes, carbon taxes and externals taxes are introduced, then these are going to reduce efficiency, aren't they? Because from an economist's point of view, with the current system, financial efficiency equals actual efficiency. If you think about it, if a company produces something in a more ecologically friendly but less efficient way, it is actually wasting more resources, surely, if it's producing it less efficiently. So the corporates have sent all their productive capacity to China, where stuff can be made cheaply and without proper regulations, because it is more efficient for them to do so, financially, and perhaps in terms of resources too. That's not, as far as I know, been studied, but it kind of stands to reason that if you're doing something in a less efficient way, you're wasting energy or something at least. So the changes of the law risk actually making things worse if you try to make companies less efficient. However, there is a counter-argument. It may not be less efficient if externalities are actually priced into the costs of production. Because at the moment, as I've mentioned earlier, what we have is companies not being charged for the damage they do, and those damages are actually being pushed onto future generations who will have to pay one way or another. The current system of making profits at the expense of the environment is simply stealing profits from the future. It's like a sort of debt system, and future generations can pay the consequences. It's depleting resources, destroying the environment, exterminating 30,000 species a year at the moment. All these extinct chickens are going to come home to roost eventually, and pretty soon. In fact, what we have at the moment is a system of piracy on the future. It's pirate capitalism. It's not real, responsible behaviour. It's not moral or ethical. In fact, it's immoral and unethical. And the universe happens to be constructed in such a way that immoral and unethical behaviour does tend to exact a price, eventually, and not necessarily on the individuals who commit it. But that price is coming, and we have to do something about it. Incidentally, the universe exacts a price far more quickly on the stupid, as it happens. If you do something stupid, you can be dead in a moment, right? If you do something unethical, well, eventually the chickens will come home to roost, but that's just the way it is in our strange existence. But if we want to limit the number of chickens that come home to roost, we do need to actually make the changes. Whether that is pricing externalities or something else, I don't know. But something has to be done, and it needs to be done with the economy. It's not just a matter of recycling more and trying to be good to the environment, although all these things are important. Nothing will really change in our system until it is far, far too late without changes to the law and the whole economic system internationally. Not many people seem to be talking about that, though. But I just want to put it out there. Maybe it'll ring a few bells, maybe somebody can do something. I don't know. What do you think? Comments below. If you like my videos, subscribe, and maybe nip over to ko-fi.com and buy me a coffee. That's ko-fi.com/Alphatucana. Bye for now.